Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. My name is Laura, and I have my BSW and MSW, and currently work as a psychotherapist in outpatient mental health in New York City. I'm also studying for my licensing exam. Keeps being delayed because of COVID, but I'm getting there. I hope everyone is having a delightful beginning of the new year. For myself, this has truly been a reset button, and I'm walking into this year feeling so refreshed. I'm ready to conquer 2021. Of course, I anticipate difficulties along the way, but I ended 2020 feeling very burned out, very overwhelmed, and now moving into the new year, I feel so refreshed, like a total 180 has happened. So today, we're going to be talking and diving into all things stress, high caseloads in social work, and how to manage it, as well as my personal thoughts on changes that need to happen related to high caseloads and just kind of the work environment that social workers are kind of just expected to deal with. But before we get started, feel free to like, share, follow this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to. I love to hear from everyone that tunes in, and I hope that you enjoy. So let's get started. So high caseloads, not an unusual concept in social work and the mental health field, unfortunately. It's kind of become one of those things that social work is really known for. Social work in the mental health field are really known for. And it's kind of sad that that's something that's almost something that's joked about. You know, people kind of make remarks about, oh yeah, high caseloads and just not having enough time and being overwhelmed and needing coffee all the time and run. And it's kind of like we have to joke about it because it's hard. Social work, like I said, is known for that. It's known for being stressful. It's known for not entirely having adequate pay. And like I said, exceptionally high caseloads. So my personal experience with high caseloads, obviously I'm a relatively new therapist. I graduated in May with my master's degree in social work. I have my permit to practice, and I will be taking my licensing exam shortly. So we'll see how it goes. But I stayed on at my graduate school internship. Field placement, I stayed on as a clinician and now work there. And so as an intern, my caseload was like 8 clients total. And I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I work as a fee-for-service therapist. I do think many therapist jobs are fee-for-service. And so basically that means that you get paid based on if a client shows up. I also work in community mental health. I work at a community mental health clinic. And so I work with a variety of people. I try to specialize in working with children and working in trauma, doing play therapy, TFCBT, and CBT. However, I do have many people that are on my caseload that are outside of that criteria. I work with older adults, many different concerns as well. Now, right now on my caseload, I see 41 patients, clients, people, whatever term you would like to use, we know what we're talking about. 41 is a lot. I did not anticipate reaching 41 clients. I remember a couple months ago in supervision, I was talking to my supervisor, of course, and she kind of asked me what I wanted my caseload to be at, and I told her 40. I think then I was like really wide-eyed, excited, really wanted to make some money because I do live in New York City. It is expensive here. I gotta make some money so I can pay my rent. And so I was like 40 clients. And to me, that was also a good number to buffer for any cancellations, any no-shows. So that way I could still somewhat have a consistent income, even with an inconsistent schedule, if that makes sense. But now that I'm at 40 plus clients, I'm now realizing the overwhelm that comes with that. I work now about 50 hours a week, which saying 50 hours a week doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And it's just hard, especially in community mental health. I have a lot more responsibilities outside of just therapy sessions. If I was only doing 45-minute sessions with my clients, and there's a few people I see twice a week as well. If I was only doing that, I don't think it would be that bad, because that's like a standard 40-hour work week. But obviously there's paperwork, there's treatment plans, there's documentation, there's planning the sessions, there's collaborating with other professionals, assisting and doing more case management activities, referring to different treatment facilities, providing paperwork, getting medical records, just a lot of like other different tasks. I also am on a team that supervises clinical administration, and so I have other clinicians and therapists that I oversee to ensure that their documentation and paperwork and caseload is good to go, because we are anticipating an audit. So I'm part of just the administrative side of that to ensure things go smoothly there. So it is a lot. And I think that's why at the end of 2020, I was feeling so overwhelmed. I was feeling so burned out. And it wasn't good either, because obviously mental health and behavior, right? When we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling stressed out, we can see that in how we behave. And I was handing in my notes late. I was so behind on treatment plans. I didn't want to go to work. I wasn't feeling motivated. I really was looking for any opportunity to just stay at home and work from home, because I do go into the office 2 days a week. I was really just trying to come up with excuses. If I did come back home after working in the office, like, I didn't do any of my paperwork because I was just home. I was finally home. I didn't want to finish anything. I really put off a lot of stuff. My time management went out the door, and it became incredibly difficult. And it was like that for a couple of months. Like, I remember struggling with that same thing in October, and it just continued. Like, I just felt like it was just a pile of things I had to get done, just this mountain. And every time I made a few steps, the wind just got too heavy and it just blew me back down to the bottom of the mountain. I don't know if that's a good metaphor or not, but we'll go with it. It was just so tremendously overwhelming. And some part of me, obviously in supervision, and I say this in a blog post that goes up today about supervision, being fully transparent and vulnerable with your supervisor is necessary for growth, and it's necessary to get adequate support. And that's something that I didn't do, because I didn't want my supervisor to think less of me. I didn't want her to think that I couldn't handle it. I really look up to her, and I wanted her to think like, I'm on top of it. I've got it covered. Like, and this is a personal thing that I've always been this way, and I'm trying to work on it, but I just have these very strict rules and regulations for myself on how I'm supposed to function, how I'm supposed to be. And when I don't meet those rules or requirements, I feel like a failure. And so for me, it was so hard for me to even be vulnerable and honest about feeling overwhelmed and feeling so stressed out at work, because I didn't want my supervisor to think I was a failure. And by verbalizing it, it was almost like I had to confirm that this was real and that I was feeling like this. And so, word of advice, if you ever start to feel that way, please. That's why we have supervision. That's why we have it, for those reasons. And of course, like I said, there were moments when I did cry. I avoided work. I felt like I didn't have my own time. That's also something that just goes in with not necessarily community mental health, but combine that with working from home. It created a very difficult dynamic for me, where it was almost like my clients felt like I was just on call because they knew I was working from home. So they kind of just thought I would just be available to them, which is rude. And no, that is not true. Just because we're working from home doesn't mean our work hours all of a sudden go out the door. Like, that's not how this works. And so right from the start, I had to make it very clear what my boundaries were. It was hard for me to do that at first, and boundaries is definitely something I've come to terms with as a therapist, that I can't be there every single second my client needs me. But with that, let's say this. I learned, especially working from home, to shut off my phone, to shut off my work notifications, to not get email notifications And that was something I really had to try hard to do. I had to make it very clear with my patients when I would answer their calls and texts and when I wouldn't. And honestly, if it's an emergency, they shouldn't be calling me anyways because I can't help them. And really just referring them to other resources, other supports, because this honestly is not my job, right? This is not an area for me to be a support. There are other resources and supports for this reason. With that being said, I began to learn anyways why those boundaries are so important. Because as a therapist, it's very easy for me to fall into this trap of not practicing what I preach to my clients. I talk about boundaries with my clients, but was I practicing boundaries for healthy relationships for myself with my own caseload? Not really. No, and that's why I was feeling so overwhelmed. And so for me, it really sunk in that the more I was just available 24/7 to my clients when this is not an on-call position, the more it confirmed for my clients that was okay to do. And it made it harder for them to problem solve and to just use those skills that we've been learning in therapy anyways. When I was so easily accessible to point them in the right direction or just listen to them and just talk to them, that was taking away from their own self-determination, from their own self-efficacy and their own abilities because they would just default to me. And that's ultimately not helpful for them anyways. As social workers and therapists, our aim is to really build up a client's own problem-solving skills and self-determination. And that's also why boundaries are so important. It goes both ways. Boundaries are not just important for you as a therapist to feel good, for you to have self-care in your life, for you to have a break from work. It's good for your client because it reinforces what you do in therapy, and it reinforces that they are capable. They have what they need in them to succeed. So we talked about boundaries with clients. Another important aspect of this that I feel like is never talked about when we have high caseloads, when we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling stressed out, is having boundaries with the agency that you work with. This is something that I just kind of realized when I was in my own therapy session with my therapist this weekend. I was talking to her and I was just like, yeah, so I've gotten really good with boundaries with my clients, but now I need boundaries with my coworkers and administration because it felt like I had been emailing the intake department and the clinic that I'm not available to take any more clients. You can see on my schedule, I don't have availability posted because I'm not taking more clients. It's not in my schedule. I'm not doing it. I will let you know if I'm ever available again, but I'm not available now. And I would still get people emailing me asking if I would take this referral, if I would take this referral, if I would take this referral. Oh, hey, we got a new client. It's a child with trauma. Here you go. Things like that. Now, my problem was I was good at setting that initial boundary, but the follow through in terms of boundaries with my agency was a part where I really struggled. So at first I talked really good game, right? I was like, I'm not taking more clients, I'm not doing this. But then they'd present me with, a child with trauma. And that's something I'm trying to grow my caseload in, is working with more children, working in more trauma work. And so to me, it seemed like, okay, well, this is a really good opportunity. Let me just take on this client. And of course, something I talked about with my own therapist was she mentioned this great idea of, okay, well, if you do take on another client, is there a different person that you can transfer out? Instead of building and building and building, are there clients where maybe you're able to refer them to a different therapist? And so thinking about that as well. In social work, it's a very widely known thing that there's high turnover, there's high burnout. I have this workbook I've mentioned before on an Instagram post. It's called the Compassion Fatigue Workbook. I don't have it with me right now, but it's a great tool. One of my professors in grad school at Columbia recommended it to us, and it's a great reference tool. It talks all about secondary traumatization, burnout, compassion fatigue, self-care, all those different things. So I definitely recommend the Compassion Fatigue Workbook. It is very much created for social workers and therapists and people in the mental health, social services field, everything that encompasses that. So it's something that's well known, and I hate that it is, because it's almost become like that's the standard, that's what the expectation is, and so that's what's okay and acceptable. And it's like, it's so talked about, and it's almost become the norm, where no one's really trying to change it. And that to me is something that's really bothersome, because that's not cool. That's not fresh. We're also an underpaid profession. I've mentioned this before too, but I think oftentimes at university and at work, people will preach self-care, like take a bath, aromatherapy, go for a walk, do all those things. And all those things are very valuable, and those tasks are good. However, that's a temporary fix. It's a temporary fix for a systematic problem of low pay. Many agencies pay like minimum wage but require a master's degree. That's crazy to me. Like, just the lack of support for social workers that's actually there. So how can we actually resolve these things at a systemic level where it's basically become the norm? I think a big thing for me is licensing policies for social work. I think it's very common practice, like things like title protection. It differs by the state, which I also think is weird. I feel like there should be national policies for that. That's a whole other thing. But to me, when it comes to title protection, that in a way can help with caseloads, with expectations of the profession, because there are distinctions in what that looks like. And so then we would bring in the NSAW, the National Association of Social Workers, maybe even the licensing boards and everything, to really hone in on what is a social worker, what qualifies as a social worker, who qualifies as a social worker, what's needed to become one. Can you call yourself a social worker if you don't have the education and license? And I think those things are important, because just like in the nursing field, right, you have a registered nurse, you have LPNs, you have many different levels. A person can't call themselves a nurse without a degree and license, correct? Correct. I did a semester and a half of nursing school. I dropped the heck out of there and found social work. But I think that's something that genuinely would help with the stress and caseloads of social work, because I feel like so much of it is very, I don't know if I'm articulating myself well when I'm trying to describe why this would be helpful, but I think it would assist in understanding the expectations and what's okay for social workers in our field. Because if it's the norm to have super high caseloads and to have low pay, but it's also the norm that we need a master's degree, to me, those things don't go hand in hand. And so I think with stricter rules on what it looks like to be a social worker, and that you need a license and you need a degree and you need this background and qualifications and education, etc., it would help in honing in on what's acceptable and what are the expectations. I'm not, this might be misconstrued in that I'm saying, okay, well, if you're not a social worker, you get stuck with the high caseloads. Not at all. I think it would be helpful to kind of have those layers and levels to practice, like an RN, like an LPN, because then expectations for who does what work, what's our role specifically and what we are supposed to do, those things can be honed in more clearly. So as a therapist, as a hopefully soon to be LMSW, maybe I wouldn't be doing case management work then. Maybe then that would be a different level of social work. And I don't really like to use the term level either, because I don't want it to seem like it's a hierarchy and one is better than the other, because that's not the case. But I do think it's important that when we talk about stress and high caseloads and stress management, we don't want to make that the norm, and we want to have a better understanding of what expectations are for the different levels of social work, but it's hard to know that because social work seems like such a broad, grouped together profession where so many people call themselves social workers or are just kind of thrown into the ring, and it can be harmful in that regard. I don't know if that makes any sense. And I don't want anything that I said to be like misconstrued in any kind of way. So I apologize if that wasn't entirely clear. This is a very off-the-cuff podcast today. So anyways, what are some other things that we can do in terms of high caseloads, systematic changes, promoting the social work career, social work education? We need more social workers, bottom line. Honestly, so many people need social workers. So many people need therapists, mental health professionals, so many people. And part of the reason is because the need is so high, but the profession is, there's not a lot of people going into social work compared to, in proportion to how many people are in need of the services. And so even, getting more people in the field, whether that's even schools of social work, lowering tuition rates, offering programs, or even offering, I don't even know, different classes, certifications, trainings, different things like that, community education, reaching out to high schools, reaching out to community colleges, all those different things, I think would be beneficial in just getting more people interested in the field. That was why I started off in nursing. Straight out of high school, I started majoring in nursing. I didn't even know social work was a thing. I had never heard that before. I was 17 years old. If someone had told me about social work, I probably wouldn't have wasted a semester and a half. But I found social work my second semester in college, and I changed my major. But I could have just started out that way and honestly graduated a year early from community college. And at a more micro level, how can we decrease stress, overwhelm? Obviously, that boils down to self-care, but we can't truly care for ourselves long-term if we don't have higher pay and lower caseloads. So how do we deal with lower caseloads? Being able to shut it off, because I know practically right now in this moment, that's what we have, and it's something that we have to learn to deal with, is high caseloads until it's an issue that's resolved. And so for me, at least, something I've learned is, like we talked about earlier, those boundaries, shutting it off and making clear the expectations of your role with your client and making a plan with them. So that way, if they are in a jam, if they are in a pickle, they know who to call, and it's not you, right? They have the other resources already on hand. So even setting the tone during the intake session on what this would look like, so it can help you down the road, because it's a lot harder for you to set those standards and boundaries and expectations when you're months and months or years into therapy. And so doing that right off the bat, if you're able to. Another good point is to take advantage of vacation days, holidays, time off. Do what you gotta do. It's rough out there. Like I said, I'm at community-based clinic. I'm a fee-for-service therapist. I only get major holidays off, even though there are other holidays like Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, all those other fun, exciting days that most people get off. I don't. And I also only get one day off during, on major holidays, because I'm fee-for-service. I also don't have benefits at my agency, so I don't really have personal time, paid leave, any of that, not to my knowledge. Or I do, but it doesn't look exactly what it would look like if I was a full-time salaried employee. So really being able to connect with other social workers, whether honestly that's unionizing, gathering together, petitioning, advocating at micro, meso, macro levels for better care for social workers, because we get preached so many things to ourselves about caring for mental health and self-care and boundaries, but when it comes actually down to the profession, it's like they want us to totally disregard all of those things when it comes to us. And so really being able to speak up for ourselves, petition, come together as one to fight for those things that in other professions are givens or automatically there. And I think with that, we can all really unite to become amazing social workers. So that could even be going to the National Association of Social Workers. It could be unionizing. I don't know if social workers have a union, or that probably based per state. But anyways, advocating, petitioning, coming together. In terms of boundaries, like I said, getting tough with your own agency, getting tough with your job. Social workers, honestly, are a hot commodity. Because there are high caseloads, social workers are needed. They need you. And so it's okay to be assertive and to put your foot down. It might seem like it's not, but ultimately they need you in the job anyways, right? And it's okay to have your own personal boundaries and to be assertive in what that looks like. With that being said, being serious about your work-life balance. And I've said this before as well. A work-life balance is a balance that works for you and nobody else. Everyone is very different. I tend to lean towards more work. I weigh a little bit more on the work side. Honestly, lately, I've been finding more of an equal balance with work life. I've been doing more activities, being more creative, going for more walks, practicing yoga, just like taking more interest in my hobbies. That is really making me feel purposeful in the life side of that balance. So I'm putting more time and energy into that, but it's whatever works for you. And also understanding that balance is flexible and it can change on a day-to-day basis. It can change with time, experiences, situations. Advocating for agency-wide change at your own place of employment. So not only getting tough with your agency, like I said before, and being assertive in your own personal experience, but bringing other employees together to petition for change or ask questions. I've seen that personally at my own agency when it came to coming back to the office. Really, everybody came together through an email chain and was kind of just like speaking their concerns, speaking their truth. And it led the agency leadership to delay and reconsider coming back into the office for some time. And then the last thing is, if it comes to the point where it is overwhelming, it continues to affect you negatively, significantly, where it becomes a true burden and you no longer have that joy. You've kind of reached that place of burnout. You feel like you are very stuck. It's okay to leave. It's okay to leave. It really is. When I was, even the last few months, when I was in the place of burnout, it came to the point where, and I'm an incredibly passionate social worker. Oftentimes in school, in undergrad and grad, I would look around and I'd be like, nobody's as passionate as me. Like, I was like the spokesperson for social work. Like, I continue to love social work. It is like it's literally the best field. It is my life's calling. It is my purpose. It is my passion. Like, no one could talk bad about social work. But then I got burned out. And to me in itself, there was some other things that came up with that, because I thought this was a field I couldn't get burned out in. And how can I get burned out if I'm passionate? I think the more passionate you are, the more likely you are to get burned out, because you will give it your all. And you will have poor boundaries. And you will bend and break for others and not for yourself. And it came to the point where I talked to my partner. I was venting to my family, I was venting to my own therapist, and I was just like, what if I just gave it all up? What if I just wasn't a social worker? I could just get married, stay at home, I could open a flower shop. I could honestly be a waiter. I could I could just work retail. Like, working retail and being a waiter sounded more appealing. And I know people get treated so poorly in those jobs too. I was really glamorizing and romanticizing a peaceful suburban life, being a stay-at-home housewife. I mean, that sounded glamorous to me, where I was just like, I don't know if I can do this. And that really broke me, because this had been the profession where, like, even after I reached retirement age, I'd still be going. Like, I didn't think there was anything that could stop me until I got burned out. Obviously now I'm not feeling that way. The holidays really honestly gave me the time and space I needed to heal and to focus on myself. But it's understandable that if you don't reach that place, it's time to leave. And it's okay. It's okay to change the profession for a little bit. You could honestly do like a 180. You could just go into a whole nother field, you know? Or you could take a break. You could go on family medical leave, you know? You could probably start seeing your own therapist. But it's truly whatever works for you in that time, in that moment, and what you need for your life and for your well-being and health. And that's ultimately the pinnacle of our focus in taking care of ourselves and dealing with high caseloads and working in this profession. It can be really easy to consume ourselves with the work and with the people that we serve. But with that, it's incredibly easy to get lost in the work. And before you know it, we look back and we realize, how did I get so burned out? But it was there all along. With that being said, thank you all so much for listening today to the Social Work Bubble podcast. We talked about a lot of different things, about high caseloads, stress, overwhelm, burnout, a whole bunch of things that kind of come wrapped into one. Licensing, we talked about so many things. So thank you all for listening today. If you want to add to this conversation at all, if something resonated with you, please share your comments wherever you're listening. Or you can head on over to my Twitter, to my Instagram, at Social Work Bub. For worksheets, resources for social workers and therapists, you can check out my Etsy shop at etsy.com/shop/thesocialworkbubble, or my blog at thesocialworkbubble.com. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're all doing well and starting off this new year right. And I look forward to seeing you next time.